Welcome to the Creative Impact Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Caldwell, and I'm so happy you're here. Each episode, I take some time to chat with fellow artists about life, faith, and the impact of the arts. Well, I am so excited to be here today with Reverend Dr. Byron Spradlin, and he is from Franklin, Tennessee, and the founder and president of Artists in Christian Testimony International, which is a missions and ministry sending board for artists and creatives. And this is so amazing that you guys have over 650 staff in more than 51 nations at this point. And I'm so excited to hear all about your journey with that. And then just a little bit more of an overview, also a professor, board on many organizations, has served as a worship pastor, Bible teacher, church planter, senior pastor, music evangelist, also recording artist, which would be fun to hear about, songwriter, the list goes on. So I encourage people to check out your bio for more details, but welcome to the podcast, Byron.
You are so welcome, Rachel, to be here, and already getting to know you a little bit has been a real thrill. Even to know sort of our background in some ways have connected even through your husband. What a nice
thing. I know that was such a fun connection when my husband mentioned, he said, I recognize that name. I think I've heard him speak before. So I love that we had that connection, that you spoke at Outreach back in the late 90s, and also connections through one of my mentors, Cynthia Newland, and she's incredible. So thank you, Cynthia, for connecting us. Well, I would love to give you a moment. Do you want to share a little bit more about yourself, just family and kind of what you're up to these days? And then we'll kind of dive into your journey.
Sure. Yeah. Listen, I've been doing ministry for over 50 years. I guess some people would want to cover that, but really it's been a very interesting time since the late 60s. And you'll tell by the end of this gathering, I still have a lot of energy and I hope a perspective over the years from the West Coast. I was born and raised near Berkeley, California. I am a Jesus follower. I came to faith, or really surrendered my life and walk to Jesus in 1968 when I was in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at University of California at Davis campus up by Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And I had I've been in music all of my life since 8 years old anyway, and I actually was on a Christian music, a pretty high-powered music group that we were traveling in Asia, and I was far away from the Lord. And that summer, God really got a hold of me. The group was called the Continental Singers. Now, I know most of your folks probably are then the 20 to 40s range. Yeah. Guys 40 to 70 might know the Continental Singers if they've been in Christian Protestant churches, because they sing about 50,000 very talented Christians in the world of music, in particular, all over the world, doing worship and pretty high-powered, great music and stuff. And so I came to faith, and then I became a music team leader during those days, and so I traveled all over Latin America, Central America, North America, the Caribbean, leading these teams. We do television and large churches and outdoor events and stuff like that. And that was during those days is when I began writing, and I got a record deal with actually through Ralph Carmichael and Light Label, which is not around anymore. I think Sixpence None the Richer was one of the last groups that was on that. But some of you know the history of music and the Christian scene. Andre Crouch was on that label, and I was an early guy in that with the solo album because Carmichael was helping with Continental Singers by writing and composing music. He was also doing stuff for Billy Graham and the films that Billy Graham was doing. But he wrote also for the Dean Martin Show back in the 60s and Anita Kerr Singers and that LA scene. So that was a really wonderful thing. So during those days, there was the Jesus movement, and I was deeply involved with that whole.
That's fascinating to me, actually, because I know the new movie, Jesus Revolution, just came out. Did you get to see that as well?
I have. And it's accurate.
It was accurate. I was going to ask if you thought it was accurate. So.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know Greg Laurie personally and such, but had a lot of, I early on stumbled into a Jewish group of folks who were believers in Jesus. And some of you will know Jews for Jesus. It became known as Jews for Jesus. And I was their first musical coach in 72, 73, got them ready for their first national tour. And they did a concert in Long Beach with Love Song.
Okay. That's so neat. Yeah, I love how the stories connect.
All that kind of West Coast scene in the utilization of artistic strategies and methods. I'd go to the free speech platform at UC Berkeley and I'd sing, you can't drive with religion, you can't look round with your eyes, you can't touch anything that might have breath, but there's no way to find that which is not lost. If you wander, you will never know the way. But Jesus isn't lost, you who must be found, and go on like that. And that would draw a crowd. And then we could share our faith. And, it was in that kind of context, which was pretty much, Love Song was doing something like that. And, the festivals that sort of sprung up during those days, kind of thing. But always saw myself really as an artistic person who had creative ways of declaring the reality and the accessibility of God, who has shown himself through Jesus and the power of his Spirit. And understood even in those early days the absolute central power of artistic expression and artistic personnel. And so you notice I didn't say we're tools. We're more than that. We're not commodified entities like a hammer.
Yeah.
No, we're humans made in the image of God, who I knew early on that we could create environments wherein God would come and people would meet him, whether it was a song or a painting or a dance effort, or later on video and film, poetry, all these writing, storytelling. These are the central ways that humans interact.
Yes.
That's why I'm so glad, Rachel, that you're involved with dance. Dance has a way of reaching into the heart of a person or a community and touching our hearts.
Yes, that's so
it's
true.
Amazing. I took a dancer who's, moderately good, but not super high powered, who had done a little choreography piece on Amy Grant's Breath of Heaven.
Oh, yeah.
Breath of Heaven. Da, 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 da. And I took her to the Tennessee Prison for Women and a thing that I was doing over there. And I had 50 women in this gym at the Tennessee Prison for Women Annex. I am telling you, we did some music and this and that, the other thing, and a little Bible teaching. But when she got up and did, she was classically trained, and this was a modern piece, and it was well executed, clean, and right. And I am telling you, those women burst into tears.
Wow.
And we ended up, that was sort of the culmination of that time. They were sitting in chairs just down on the gym floor. We had a mic out there, and then we cleared a space so that she could dance on this gym floor. We prayed with every one of those women, and numbers of them gave their hearts to Christ that evening.
That's beautiful.
This dance is such a multi-dimensional environment where we touch the transcendent realities of life.
So true.
Now, I just wish, part of my ministry even now is to help church leadership, church mission and academic leadership around the world understand these realities.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's, I don't know if that got everything that you.
Yeah, that's great. That gives a good overview. Yeah.
But even understanding, and you don't have to be old to understand this. In fact, I think people of your generation and younger are understanding this clearly. They may not articulate it in the ways that I do. That's not important. But the fact that this younger set and remember, I mean, I think half the population of Mozambique is like under 17.
Wow.
Give me a break.
Yeah.
We have got, and I was at an academic ministry thing some years ago at a seminary. I mean, some years ago, it was like 2 or 3 before COVID. And we were talking about the role of hip hop in evangelism and Christian community formation in many of these cultures that are more oral than they are literary. They're not dumb. They're just oral, not literary. They think just like everybody else, and they're interacting with God, and we've got the resources to create these environments, and we are the people that God has given to the body of Christ and to the world to be able to shape these environments wherein people can touch Him. Not to mention the other transcendent realities of reality.
Yeah. Well, this just gets me so excited. I love hearing your passion, your heart for this. And I know this starts, like you were saying, back in kind of the late 60s, early 70s, when God just really met you during that time. And I love how you describe your assignment from God being discipling people out of a music and arts background, working them into the fabric of the church, missions, and marketplace ministry around the world. And I was like, whoa, that's awesome. So I'm so curious when you first kind of understood that to be your assignment, your mission in life.
Well, look, I was, I mean, every one of us who I think comes to faith is encouraged by other people. So that is a dynamic of discipleship, whether you're doing a camp, a crew, discipleship piece of paper and
right, whether it's formal or informal. Yeah,
that is correct. People are pouring their lives into us, and I define discipleship as investing our lives in the lives of others on behalf of God, and hoping that we will literally see them come to involve themselves in Christ companioning, a daily worship walk with Him. They're carrying out Christ's commands, and there are at least 8 in the Gospels, and then developing Christ's character, which you could just put the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faith, gentleness, those dynamics of life. And so that's where we want people to go. But I was seeing in those times, because I was doing a lot of traveling in a lot of churches, doing music and ministry and such, maybe, even 200 churches a year in those, many of those early days, I began to dawn on me that, now look, I'm a part of the clergy club right now. I'm an ordained pastor, and, with a lot of academic studies and this kind of thing, hopefully a lot of practical experience as a church planter, senior pastor, worship pastor, growth scenarios and all that. But I realized early on that a lot of the clergy community wasn't friendly towards the artists. And I already understood that the artistically gifted person is one of the most powerful declarers of God's reality and His accessibility of anybody in the body of Christ. Then, as I began to grow in my understanding of Scripture, I realized that God had placed these people into the believing community. Now, remember that the Old Testament believing community of Israel, not all Israelites, we're not going to see all Israelites in heaven. Yeah. There were unbelievers there as well as there were believers there, but they were looking towards God's salvation, which in the Hebrew Scriptures is pointing towards the coming of Messiah, who is the culminating offering or atoning work of God through Messiah Jesus, who died and was buried, raised from the dead through the resurrection power of God's Holy Spirit, right? This is all Trinitarian theology. No matter what your denominational background is, and ascended to the right hand of God, where He is sitting there now as our advocate, our attorney. Talk to your husband about that.
That's true.
He is defending us. He's our advocate. So even back as God was designing the sacrificial system, He gave the plans to Moses, but Moses then was assigned to Bezalel and Oholiab, these guys who had, and what's the definition of a craftsman? Here it is. Someone who is unusually wise at imaginative design or expression. Everybody has imaginative capability because we're made in the image of God. But some people have unusual capacity of wisdom for design and expression.
So good.
And we see those guys had those men and women, because there were women as well as men involved in that whole thing, modified by 5 wisdom words in the Hebrew language: wisdom, knowledge, skill, ability, understanding. We see those are the same 5 things that modify dancers, modify musicians, modify singers, modify any of these, what I call imaginative expression specialists. I like that word better than artists, because when we say artists, we really kick into our unconscious Western definition of post-enlightenment or enlightenment, what we call artists now. These people who wear a beret, who are counterculture, individualistic, creative people who are just going around doing their own thing and expressing themselves. That's not at all what the artist is. The voice and the heart expression specialist of the culture in every era of history.
Wow.
You just check it out. Go talk to your own scholar.
Yes.
Artists, no matter whether they're believers in the true and living God revealed in the Hebrew scriptures and through Jesus in the newer Testament and the new covenant relationship with him. But artists have always reflected the reality of the culture, even if it's a derelict culture. The Tower of Babel was actually a ziggurat. It was an architectural creation for the worship of false gods and spirits. And God said, okay, I'm not having it. I'm done.
Yeah.
Not happening. And so he sped up the multiplication of languages to confuse them, so they couldn't pull together to finish that false worship architectural effort and an artistic effort. How about that?
No,
See, we don't
true.
think in those terms.
No. Yeah.
So
we tend to get kind of a narrow view of.
That's right. And so that's why I like terms like artistic kingdom servant, creative kingdom servant, imaginative expression specialist. And I'm not trying to be a smart guy or something like that. We have got to think differently because sometimes our categories are just bankrupt.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking too long.
No, this is great. This is great.
Okay. You're a dancer,
right?
But you're also a Christian. Well, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? I mean, even today.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I don't think so, but that's maybe benefit of growing up around communities, right?
Well, you're going to be doing pole dancing at some point or something like that. No. You don't have to do that. Forgive me for kind of getting on the racy edge of things. But everybody's thinking about those things.
Right. And kind of just the normal cultural view of dancer. Yes.
Yeah. And normal Christians in the cultural view. Yes. They're thinking about the same kinds of stuff. Now, you put a clergyman, a clergywoman in this setting, and they're still hesitant about this. Because number one, it's a strong spokesperson that sometimes seems to be in competition with the preacher. So that's why we have to work together. And that's why we need to realize the importance of these people who are unusually wise at imaginative design and expression. Just go back and look at Exodus 25 through 40 and just see how God used these artisans of all kinds. There's 19 artistic industries that I've found in the Hebrew scriptures.
Wow.
And all of these, every one of them is used in the development of the worship system in that 1500 up to the time of Messiah, developing the tabernacle, the clothing of the priests, the activities, the rituals and pageants and celebrations. All of these are implemented by artistically endowed people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not for some fringe element of the culture, but it's for the central pageant, ritual, celebration functions of the community.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. That's
Wow.
awesome. And I'm curious, I mean, your thoughts on what kind of led to that. I got to hear you on another couple of podcasts as well as I was getting to know you for this, but the idea of, kind of, especially the Western culture being very thinking, logic driven versus maybe God's intention, which is kind of that integration of thinking and creativity and imagination and expression. Anyways, I'm going to let you chat about that or share about that because
Sure.
I was just
Sure.
really fascinated with that concept.
Well, that's a very good observation. I mean, in the West, actually, because of our biblical and Christian perspective, you find science thriving in the West. That is, in the East, for example, they had the technology to do flight control in Hindu settings, but Hinduism, one of its dynamics is it worships nature. And so when you worship something, you don't fool with it.
Right.
You just let it be. In the biblical perspective of the Western civilization is based on Christian thinking, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole deal of the sanctity of life, our whole justice and jurisprudence system all over the world that dominated by the West is really on biblical ideas that the individual actually is valid and has value and has sanctification. That's important. That's why I'm not talking about like Middle Ages. I'm going back to Moses, 1500 BC, who said, you can't just kill a guy. You got to have two witnesses.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Yeah.
Remember, in that age, it was might is right. It was Nietzsche before the philosopher Nietzsche was even thought about. Nebuchadnezzar, these guys, if they had the sharpest sword and the biggest muscle, they just cut your head off. Yeah. There was not a sense of morality. Right. And hey, that's not right, you think? But I mean, this stuff went on. It was even, Romans tried to do something in that arena and had sort of a hard-edged kind of justice for certain people, not everybody. But the scriptures lay out that everybody is valuable, and that was to be known far and wide. The Jews were to express and reveal to the world who God is.
Yeah.
How about that? Okay, so in all of that, with the development of more literacy with the Gutenberg press and the development of technology, which came because the Christian viewpoint about life is that God allows us to be co-creators with him. We're not co-gods, we're not little gods, but he gives us imaginality. How about that?
Yeah.
But if we get off track, we can use imaginality to really mess things up.
True.
But we've got all of this science and technology, that developed. And during that time, we also began to see literacy grow. And the downside to our human fallen nature is that we think we're little gods. And so instead of praising God for the fact he allows us to think and invent things and stuff like that, we displace him. And we said, oh, I thought all this cool stuff up, so I must be God. Well, in that, artists along the same time said, I can create what I want to create. And, it's Romans chapter 1. That which is known about God is evident through all of creation. But what we do is just simply not give him acknowledgement as the one who gives us this ability. And so we start worshiping ourselves rather than him. And artists have been no different. So they started developing these notions that I just do this and that and everything, out there. And so now we see artists as sort of marginalized on the fringe of mainstream culture. And, it's the Andy Warhols and the Picassos who just, do all this stuff. Not that I mind abstract art. I do not at all. I love it, quite frankly. And there's a modern, what I would call public theologian, intellectual artist, Makoto Fujimura. Mako is a friend of mine. And, he's confusing all of modern art world because he's one of the greatest modern artists, painters of our time. He's a believer in Jesus.
Yeah,
there you go. That's not supposed to happen,
That's awesome.
And I think, anyway, so in all of this, we have the Western community has become a rationalist orientation. It's the rationality that is our key. God's dead. We can think this stuff through, which is why now scientism has become sort of our God. And we still lean into scientist technology. That's why I like Dr. John Lennox and some at Oxford University, a mathematician and such. I like guys like that who, they're brilliant, off the chart, and yet they're loving and gracious. Okay. What's happened in the church, particularly because we wanted the Bible in the language of the people, the Reformation swung us, and there's some historical reasons, and it's pretty complicated, but it's kind of understanding. We placed the emphasis on the syllable of the written word and the intellectual evaluation of it. And so many of the religious environments in community, Protestant as well as Catholic, more Protestant, got into this dynamic of we're just going to figure everything out. We're going to develop our systems of theology. And in that, we don't need sign and symbol anymore. So we broke off from the Roman center of the church and from the Constantinople or Byzantium part of the church, the Orthodox Church. And we also broke away from, don't forget Alexandria, Egypt, which was the Coptics now are there, but that was a center of early church development in North Africa. And so these places were just different, not exactly denominations, but streams of our faith.
Yeah.
And a lot of those streams in the West were dominating or focused on the academic and intellectual dimension of our faith, which is absolutely important, but it needs the other dynamics of our humanity. So religion cannot be boiled down to a set of dogmas.
Right.
We're dealing with a dynamic, visceral relationship with the true and living God. How about that's why when the Lord gave us his prayer instruction, the first petition or request in the Lord's Prayer, I could be tricky and say, what is it? I'm just going to tell you so that nobody's embarrassed.
Sounds good.
It's Lord, hallowed be your name. What that means is, will you be consecrated as holy in my life?
Yeah.
Do you realize why when you as a dancer choreograph some sort of music, you don't even need music. If you just choreographed movement that honored God for his transcendent, sovereign, supreme holiness. And when you do that, we actually get it better, don't we?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, just saying, God, you're holy. No way. No way.
But when you see that, like physical expression or even in music can, I think, do the same thing, any of these.
Every one of the artistic genres in its own way, it's bigger than our rational intelligence. It's not outside of our rational intelligence, but it's bigger. And that's why when you see how God has given us imaginal intelligence as well as emotional intelligence. And we even have some of our denominations, mine, in my background, emotion is basically not good. No.
Right.
That's incorrect. Emotional intelligence. In fact, if all three of these dynamics of intelligence are not working together as God intended them, you will have a skewed and perverted understanding of what's going on.
That's so good.
Religion is not legalism.
Yeah.
See, people want one of two things, but they don't want faith. Faith has if you're faithing in the Lord in your daily life, there's lots of gray areas. That doesn't mean we can't understand clearly the moral boundaries of reality. We can. It's so clear in the Bible. If you will surrender yourself and submit yourself to God and his scripture as our only guide for faith and practice, it is so clear you can't even wipe your nose without thinking about it. It's just clear. But the dynamic of you and your husband praying and asking God for next steps about what you're going to do with your life or your family, there's a dimension of gray area in there.
Yeah.
And there's also a dimension of God touching you and speaking to you subjectively, even though it's within the boundaries of the objective revelation of Scripture. That's where we're working. And that is actually the artistic kingdom sermon specialty. And that is capturing these dynamics of imaginal and emotional expression in line with our rational realities that God has revealed to us. That's where we are key. And notice how we have to fit together, not on the fringe of community, but with the rest of the community of servant leadership in the body of Christ and in our Christian church community, local, regional, national, and international.
Yeah. How have you seen that within the church, like broader church, capital C church? How have you seen that
work out?
Yes, work out as far as, people linking up together, strategizing, being in unity, I guess, in leadership. Have you witnessed that? And then also any encouragement for us today?
Well, it needs to happen more, and it needs to happen at the local, regional, and national level, as well as international. I've had the joy for a number of years, actually, since in a distant way, 1974, and then in a direct way from 1987 forward, working with the Lausanne Committee for World Evangelization, which Billy Graham started back in Lausanne, Switzerland in 1974. It came out of a 1968 conference in Berlin, talking about the need for direct evangelism. And there was a time in the 60s and early 70s where there were liberal Protestants who were saying, we don't need evangelism anymore. We've got Christianity in every geopolitical nation. And it was back in 1974 when Dr. Ralph Winter, a missiologist at Fuller Seminary, former missionary in Central America, pointed out there were over 16,000 people groups who had not yet heard the gospel at all and were in no proximity whereby they could hear it.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, that was 74. That kicked off this Lausanne Committee for World Evangelization, now called the Lausanne Movement. I, in my involvements with Jews for Jesus, where I had become the chairman of their board, which was also the chairman of Artists in Christian Testimony, because we were under one ministry at that time.
Yes.
We sent one of our representatives in 74. 87, I attended the Younger Leaders Conference in Singapore and actually led the worship for the Tuesday night meeting.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
And it was interesting because I did a couple of spirituals. Move up this morning with my mind. Stayed on Jesus and come go with me to that land. Come and afterwards, actually, an African fella from Soweto, South Africa, down by it was one of the townships in South Africa, came up and said, I can tell that you've had some experience being around Black people.
Yeah.
I was raised in a multi-ethnic city near Berkeley, California, Richmond, California, near Oakland, California, same kind of cultural diversity there. And yeah, so I can do R&B and that kind of thing. And so that was actually one little time where we had lots of different musical expressions. Now, as I grew on, the next year, I produced the the Younger Leaders Conference in Washington, D.C., 1988. And we had numbers of different kinds of musics and we had some dance expressions. I think it was at Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, and they had dancers, or we had another big African-American choir that came in with Chuck Colson speaking that night.
Yeah.
So we saw at these larger gatherings that there was some openness to having this kind of dynamic expression. And then I was a program stage director for the Manila gathering, about 5,000 of us in 1989, where we really worked to have a cross-section of expression of dance and dramatic presentation, as well as music. And it was well received. I remember there in 89, we had the King's Kids, which was a musical group from YWAM. And in 88, I had commissioned about 50 different national banners, or that had different kinds of things. We still had those banners with us. And so we had the King's Kids come in and do a procession, and then at the end do a recession of these guys. So it wasn't exactly dance, but it was movement.
Yes.
Pageantry.
Right.
And we came in with that big, and it was a smash hit and helped people celebrate this kind of thing. And, for dance, if they can't handle dance, try movement.
Yes.
And try pageantry. That's the little pragmatic suggestion to move people along in these kinds of things. And then, matter of fact, after that, there was not another world conference. It was a gathering of the Luzon movement in 2004 in Pattaya, Thailand. And I wasn't involved with the program on that, but there was a big arts track where we wrote a paper called Redeeming the Arts. And so there were about 50 of us around that were dealing with actually part of the theological and missions discussion. How does this stuff fit in the mission of the church? So you can still get that paper. And if any of your listeners want to have that, I can get that for them.
Awesome.
Then, where I'm going with this is in Cape Town in 2010, there was the third World Conference. And I and two professors from Fuller Theological Seminary Brim Center, we were the three folks who produced the worship event. And in that event, we commissioned an African musician, worship facilitator, Trevor Sampson, to create African motifs. And actually, it was Dr. Ed Wilmington and Dr. Clay Schmidt who were responsible for the opening, closing ceremonies. And we did this sort of a variation on the 89 thing, where the King's Kids came in and out. We had 60 dancers and a 60-piece orchestra, which Ed Wilmington directed. And this whole dance movement with multimedia that was trying to reflect the grandeur of God's work in the world. And on the closing session, so there was this procession in. On the closing session, there was we built the whole evening around actually an Anglican communion liturgical form. It was 2.5 hours long.
Wow. Yes.
And again, singing and music and orchestra and dancing and this artistic communion service. And then I produced the worship team. I recruited about 18 voices from around the world and a beautiful African rhythm section for the most part. In that, Jason French from John Piper's church was there to facilitate the keyboard. He's a marvelous classical and pop and jazz and everything, a pianist and keyboard guy. Anyway, we created these multi-dimensional times of singing and praise and reverence before the Lord. Notice I didn't say the worship time, like the music is just the worship time. Give me a break. Worship is reverencing and responding to the reality and the person and the work of God and the triune God. And so there's a whole lot of stuff involved with that, especially in a gathered setting. And yet it was so great. One night, and I was not performing, but I was producing and directing. And dance kind of broke out. Like we had 5,000 people in the room,
Yeah.
and all of these Latins and Africans leapt to their feet and started sort of a line dancing,
Oh, cool.
like a conga line,
Yes. Love that.
And they looked out at me and said, "Is this okay?" I said, "Let it go, let it go, let it go."
Yeah.
And then I saw the director then of the Billy Graham Center in Wheaton, Illinois, dancing himself in the line. I said, "Okay,
yes.
we're safe." Now, I think that 2010 gathering of 5,000, there were 4,000 church mission academic leaders and 1,000 volunteers from around the world there in Cape Town. That changed the ethos, I think, in some ways, of at least that segment of the evangelical church. So they had 25,000 church mission academic leaders in that Lausanne movement, which I later became the head of the International Arts Network for 10 years. I've just stepped out of that role because you can only do 2 5-year times, and turned it over to Dr. Uday Balasundaram, who's doing a good job moving things forward.
Yeah.
But I think in that gathering, Rachel, and those subsequent gatherings and the leadership gatherings, I have seen that, and the trickling out. We got so much feedback. It was amazing about this being the most meaningful communion service I have ever participated in.
Wow. Yeah.
And all these multi-expressional activities, which were not just performance, people participated. Worship in gathered worship needs to be participative. The specialist needs to lead people into what's okay in worship, and they need to model what's all right. And then they need to get out of the way and release the congregant into their own personal worship. I often say all worship is personal. Sometimes it's public, and most all the time it's private. But if it's not personal, if there's not engagement in the acknowledging of God, the reverencing before God, I oftentimes ask, so where is worship located? And that's a tricky little question.
Yeah.
I suggest to you, that's right.
Yeah. In the
it
heart.
is that inner Godward expression of the heart. Now, John Piper has written on this and very helpful. But when you stop and think about it, Dallas Willard talks some about this dynamic at the core of our being, which he says is either spirit, will, or heart. So he uses those terms interchangeably with us and in his writing still. This dynamic, this inner Godward expression of the heart at this place of this unembodied awareness of self, where is located the unembodied power of choice.
That's deep. Yeah.
That makes us a human being. That's different than what dogs or goats or moose or whales. It's different. It's a higher level of interaction. It's this interaction, that crown jewel of God's creation, humanity, on whom he breathed his spirit, and in whose image he has made us.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah. So at that point, that personal engagement, we've seen that at some of these places with the Lausanne movement, and I'm sure others. I mean, you take any, but I've been engaged directly in those settings. It's interesting, whether it's the exponential conferences, or one of my guys he came out of the Lutheran gathering, and he was in charge of, thousands of Lutheran youth moving together in these larger dynamics. And we're finding more and more, we need more participation, and we need less pontification. I don't know if I've said that before, but it's a good way to think about it.
It is, for
more
sure.
Participation, less pontification, and more storytelling. And we've seen a shortening of the lecture, which I think is a good thing, as long as there's other places where we are instructed and such. But we are getting instruction still in those contexts. It's just not in a rational format. It's often in a narrative format or a wisdom format. Oh, that sounds like the Bible.
It does. That's true.
The Bible is mostly narrative and wisdom literature.
It's true.
And much less of it is rational or intellectual in the sense of a rational discourse.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that doesn't mean that that's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, it's not bad. It's good. Who thought up writing down the 10 Commandments in print form? God did.
Uh-huh.
He gave them orally to Moses. He said, now write them down. Why? Context. You got to have context to understand anything. There's no understanding without context. So here he's in second millennium BC. God gives this written in historical and cultural context. And as one of the news commentators, Ted Chappell, I forget his name. These are not the 10 suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
These 10 things allow freedom. You can't have freedom without believing that life is sanctified and you can't just kill it.
Right.
Can't murder. You can't kill, but you can't murder. Just wacko. Boom.
Mm-hmm.
The sanctity of family. Thou shalt not commit adultery is not about sex. Much more than that. It's about the sanctity of the family unit, the prime unit of human community, where people learn about God, people learn about morality, people learn about civility, how to get along with one another, sacrifice, sharing, all those kinds of, you learn that in family.
True.
And then the sanctity of truth, don't lie. The sanctity of private property, don't steal. And the sanctity of boundaries, don't covet. You cannot have freedom without those 5 things.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And frankly, if you look at world history, you don't have it.
Yeah.
Without that. And then how do you have those 5? You've got to honor God. And that's what the first of those things are. God is in the middle of everything. There really is a God. Yeah. And he's really good. And he really loves us. He's not trying to make our life miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Paganness makes our life miserable.
Right.
Doing whatever we darn well please makes our life miserable.
Yeah, he knows how we will flourish. Yes.
Exactly. And so we artists, we can embrace this stuff in our songs and dances and poetry and literature and novels. Think about, the Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia, on and on.
Yes.
All these
it's
things.
Amazing how much can be learned through story, and understood at kind of that deep level. So good. I love just all those concepts and how you're really speaking value into the artist or the creative, people that are bringing that element to the church and to the world.
That's right.
So yeah, I am curious to kind of dive a little bit into the idea of mentorship. What do you think, through your experience, some of the key elements of, maybe actually discipleship is the better word to use, but mentorship, discipleship, some of the key elements, and then what are some of the resources that you guys have worked on providing through Artists in Christian Testimony International? Here's
an easy little acronym that might help you. I care for artists, and I think artists have to care for artists, because we see the importance of it more than anybody else, and anybody else we can get as an artist advocate, that's icing on the cake.
Yes.
But I have CARE, and I don't mean to be cheesy, but I mean just a little handle that will help you create community for artists. And I got a friend in San Diego, Roy Cochran, the Third Chair Ministries. He was a worship minister, and now he's older, he and his wife, and they still are worship leadership and stuff. But he's a third chair. He's got a chair. Person that he's encouraging has a chair, and Jesus is in the meeting. In the power of his Spirit. So the third chair. So there you go.
Yeah,
and so
I like that.
A dynamic of encouragement. Remember, really, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier or not, but discipleship, I know I did this. Discipleship is caring for other people on God's behalf, investing your life in other people's lives on God's behalf. I mean, just not rocket science.
Yeah, that's a great description.
Right. And then we need ROI. It's relational, it's organic, but it's also intentional. Now, it can be a lot more than organic, But if it's not organic, it won't work. It's just another class. You put your rear in a chair and go through this little religious deal and get your certificate. But if it's information and not transformation, you're dead.
True.
You might as well just forget it. We're talking transformation here, which doesn't happen in an 8-week course. 8-week courses are important. Take as many as you possibly can, unless you get anal about it and think that those make you spiritual, then stop taking it for a while.
So true.
Okay, so we got this doing life with people, okay?
Yes, community there.
In that, create community. What Roy does down in San Diego is he's got these little, he invites, 8 or 10 people over to his wife's in his home, artists. They sit down and they say what's going on with each other. They have a little prayer together. I mean, it's just it's like an accountability group or a care group. It's nothing new under the sun here, but he just does it. What a thought! Like about 10 of them a year, So he's dealing with about 100 artists, and then every now and then he does these larger, what I call festival gatherings, And he actually have tricked out their backyard so they can. It's their San Diego, they got year-round summer down there.
Love it.
And so they can have these guys in, and they have some people share their art, and they just love. So community, which is connection. So connection and community, and this can happen with you and 2 other people, your family and another couple. Invite them over. Another couple of individuals. Invite them over and have them bring a little of their artwork, have them explain it. And then the second thing is admire.
Yeah.
Just admire them. My life, I really think what you're doing is cool. And I hope that when you get off this call, you'll go, he really thought what I was doing was really cool and important.
Yes, that's true.
Well, you know what? I really do.
Yeah.
It is not a shtick. It is not a manipulative thing. We're doing this for free. I get lots of stuff out of it, but no money.
Right. Yes. Just
come on,
just connecting and sharing that encouragement.
Yeah. So you're admiring, you're advocating, you're appreciating. Use any A word you want.
I like that.
Just admire. I tell pastors, don't you admire what these guys do? Does everybody have to be a theologian to get your admiration? Can't you ever go, good night? That really is cool. See, cool is a worship word, or it's a value word. It means I value you. I delight in what that is. How wonderful. Isn't that worship? Adoration, to adore, to appreciate. In my own personal interaction with the Lord on a daily basis, all through the day, by the way, not just in your quiet time, that certainly, but Lord, this is really cool what you've done.
Yeah.
This is phenomenal. I mean, are we attentive, as the big cool word in contemplative? Do we attend to nature and stuff? Do we, that's a kind of.
A lot of times we're very distracted and we don't really give our attention.
So you dancers, I know you attend to even isolation, how you can move a shoulder or a hand while not moving anything else.
Yes.
You attend to these things, you figure it out, then you practice it so that you can move these subtleties. Well, that's not just like a little deal. You've worked 3 years to do that.
Yeah.
With a sense of fluidity and beauty. Right. Oh, what a thought. How about that? And so you've got this connect and community for C. A is admire, appreciate, advocate, assist, those kinds of things. R is resource. And there's a lot of different kinds of resources through relationships. That's the big deal. Frankly, if you just give time for people, and if you do this on a consistent dynamic, like I've done this for 50 years. I've got people all the time. We've got 650 plus people on our roster who make up over 500 ministry departments and efforts. And when we do a gathering, they come and say, Byron, thank you for kind of hanging and being at this for 50 years. I think that's what it's going to take. That there's still, it's are you the hare or the tortoise? Well, the tortoise won that race, if you know anything about those fables. And I think that's what we're going to have to do in the church. That's why I encourage you, continue this kind of podcast as long as it's not bankrupting you, to keep encouraging. You can encourage people just as much as I can, and your encouragement counts just as much as anybody else's. And for the people you're encouraging, it counts for more.
Yeah.
And listen, all of you who are listening right now, same goes for you. Well, nobody's doing it for me. Okay, so do it for somebody else, and the blowback will be your encouragement. You will get community and admiration and relational resourcing. But to be technical about resourcing, we need to give encouragement. Sometimes I use a vision, validate, inspire, provide structures. That's what A.C.T. International, Artists in Christian Tech, it provides structures for you to have a nonprofit setting, to have ministerial accountability, to have people who know what they're doing actually do your back office for a while until you can learn it yourself. You're also having accountability. Listen, if people are going to give you money, they need to think you're going to handle it right. So they need to trust you. And there needs to be accountability so that you will demonstrate integrity.
Yes.
That's 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 16 through 21, when the Apostle Paul was gathering that big offering to take from Asia Minor, the churches in modern-day Turkey and Eastern Greece, back up to Jerusalem to make friends with unrighteous mammon, from the Gentile Christians to the Jewish Christians. And he needed accountability. And as Titus arrived to his group of other guys who were appointed by the church, regional churches, he said, remember, we wanted to do not only what was right in the eyes of God, but what was right in the eyes of men. Now, you go, whoa, that sounds backwards. No. Everybody in these nonprofit charity and church things thinks we're a bunch of charlatans. We've got to stand with transparency and make sure that we do have receipts for the reimbursements we've taken. And we're not just putting stuff under the table and trying not to pay our taxes. Stop that, man. That kills the integrity. Jesus said, render to Caesar what's Caesar's and render to God what's God. Get on with life in your context. In a not very nice context, by the way, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Caesar was tougher than the IRS.
True.
I only want to give the IRS as little as possible in a legitimate way.
Yeah.
But pay your taxes. Just pay it. Get on.
It's a good word.
And then go to the next part of that Lord's Prayer. Lord, you give me my daily bread.
Yes, recognizing where our provision comes from.
That is right. Okay, so let me finish. We have structures, and then instruction, and organization, and nurture. Okay, so I can give you those things later on. But that's what care, community, admiration, resources, and then E is encouragement, envisioning, and education, and equipping. That's what I'm kind of doing today. And in a big, I hope I've given you some sense of community, some sense of admiration. There are resources out there, and I'm trying to envision for you a bigger view of the reality that you are, in fact, living out. You're already living this out. I mean, you are, Rachel. Your listeners are doing this. And here's where little is a big deal. Just do it a little bit. Listen, I met the woman I married because I was discipling a drummer who was dating this non-Christian girl. And I said, you better dump that girl because I've had some unfortunate experience dating a non-Christian. And he didn't. And he brought her to church and she got saved. And 2 years later, we started dating.
That's great. So fun.
So good things come out of discipling. You know what I'm saying? And I'm still friends with that very guy today.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah. And he's a friend of mine, and we've encouraged each other. And I was his youth pastor, and we're still in touch with each other. And all
so neat. Yes, I love it. And just seeing how God is faithful. And when we kind of come together and help support each other in this journey of life, just that's going to help move the kingdom forward, So
Yep. I hope I answered that a little bit with that CARE.
I love that. Yes.
And the ROI.
I like that ROI
So,
instead of return on investment.
Relation, organic, but intentional.
Intentional. Yes. It's great. It helps to have those acronyms because it's easy, like you said, to hold on to and to remember down the line when we're thinking about.
Look, you asked me about, what does Artists in Christian Testimony International provide?
Yes.
We provide a ministry context. We're an easy 501c3. That's why most people come to us. We are a church organization, even though we operate as the church in a lot of the cracks between the various local churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of us who are in arts are not dealing with just one church. We're kind of at large in the community or in the nation or in the world. And so we're just a regular old mission agency like Cru or InterVarsity or Operation Mobilization or YWAM or the Evangelical Alliance Mission or Wycliffe Bible Translators or Mission Aviation Fellowship or on, your denominational thing, only we're a faith mission. Everybody has to raise their own support for their own ministry endeavors. And we take a percentage of that, 11%, that goes, and that's kind of in the middle of where mission agencies are these days.
Mm-hmm.
And then we care for you and help move you forward, help instruct you in how to build your ministry, build your own ministry team, and move forward in the ministry assignment that God has given you. Here's what a lot of people say, a lot of artistic kingdom servants say after they meet us: you guys get me. And so we have a little rack card that says artist, ministry, we get you. Love
that. Yes. There's that sense of understanding, connection, that you're not alone.
And yet we are part of the church. We're it's just like any other mission or a ministry agency. But I like to say, and it seems to make sense, we're part of the church, but we're operating in the cracks between the various local churches.
Yes, that's a great image.
Yeah, that's a hard zone to find,
It is. Yes, so good. Thank you for sharing that. I think it'll be helpful. And I'll definitely link to your website and resources so people can find that. And I feel like we could just keep going. It'd be so great. But as we wrap up today, just to honor your time, I would love to give you an opportunity to just share kind of one final word of encouragement for the listeners today, and whatever you have on your heart today.
Well, I just want you to know you're not strange, you're creative. You're not rebellious, you're innovative. You're not a contrarian. You are an imaginator. And if you can understand and take to heart, and you'll have to pray about it and ask the Lord to help you, God made you this way. He likes you the way you are.
Yeah.
Whether Christian leaders do or not, you scare some people.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, because you are his poema, his poem, his masterpiece, Ephesians 2:10, he created you in Christ Jesus for good works, which he predestined you for. Those good works don't save you. But as you surrender your life to him, embrace the reality of your creativeness. And don't be angry about the people who don't get it. Just love on those who do and serve the Lord and serve others. And I'm telling you, he will fill your life up with purpose and with a great deal of pleasure and delight. Surrender to him. There's no other way to do it. And it's not necessarily always easy, but it's deeply fulfilling. And I bet you'll have a more exciting life than you could ever imagine, and one that, like, everybody would like to have, but very few people get hold of.
Yes.
God bless you.
Thank you so much. Final question, just for fun, and I'm curious to know your answer, is what is one of your favorite things right now? And that can be anything in your life right now that's one of your favorite things.
It's crazy. Hanging out with my wife and family has become a pretty big deal, because I have not always done that. And I'm seeing the importance of that. And so, that's key. Let me give you one passage,
Oh, yeah.
Psalm 71, 17 and 18. It says this, it's the psalmist cries out to God, God, you have taught me from my youth, and I still declare your wondrous deeds. And even when I'm old and gray, God, do not abandon me until I declare your strength to this generation, your power to all who are to come. That would be my encouragement to all of you here, no matter what age you are, continue to declare his glory to those who are going to come after. So that's why it's been such a privilege being with you, Rachel, so much. And I pray blessing on Creative Impact Podcast. And all of you who are listening, tell your friends to listen more here. I've got a feeling that Rachel is going to give you a lot of good material to encourage you, and it'll all be from the Lord.
Oh, thank you so much, Byron. This has been such a joy and a gift to me, and I'm so excited for all that are going to get to listen to this conversation as well. And what's the best way for people to connect with you and with your work?
Info@actinternational.org, all spelled out, or our website, actinternational.org.
Perfect. And I will link to that as well and on our website. And I'm just so thankful for you, Byron, and also pray blessings over you and all the ministry that you guys are doing. And so excited to be connected through through this podcast. So
good. Bless you so much, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you. You can find all the links, full show notes, and additional resources on our website, creativeimpactpodcast.com. If you're interested in supporting the show, some great ways to do that are to share it with a friend, to rate and review wherever you're listening. And then also, if you're interested in giving financially, you can check out our Patreon community, where you get bonus content each month and have a special part in helping make this podcast possible. You can access our Patreon community on the link at our website or by going to creativeimpactpodcast.com/PATREON. Thank you all so much for listening to the Creative Impact Podcast. The music for the show was produced by Michael Cash. Until next time, remember that you were designed to create. You were made to inspire. Continue living with purpose and making an impact. I'll see you next time, friends.